Welcome to Life's Rich Tapestry, a podcast exploring the narrative of people's layered lives. Listen in on courageous conversations spoken from the heart. Gain insight into another's life as we tackle compelling topics which will expand your mind, help you gain perspective, and might even inspire you to do things differently. My name is Evelyn, and I look forward to your company. What do you do when someone you care about has mental health issues? According to the Australian government website, the Australian Institute of Health and Welfare, $10.6 billion was spent in the 2018-19 financial year on mental health, and 4 million Australians received mental health-related prescriptions the following financial year. Now, what makes this staggering is that these figures are before the effects of the COVID pandemic. Mental health can affect our family, work colleagues, friends, neighbors, and ourselves. One successful business owner, husband of 25 years, father of 4, lawyer, and published author Justin Rickard experienced firsthand a close friend going through a mentally challenging time. Justin went inward, and in that process found the 4 levels of happiness. So I would like to welcome Justin to the show. Welcome to the show, Justin.
Thanks, Evelyn. Nice to be here.
Yeah, it's so good to have you here. Now, I wanted to start at the beginning. When you found out that your friend was going through this time, how did that make you feel, and what did you want to do?
I found it in quite a dramatic way because the person was really in a crisis situation. Yeah, my initial response was to help them. Probably there was some significant self-interest in that, I suppose. The person was very close to me. But definitely wanted to help them because they were in a complete crisis at the time.
When you were able to help them, what did that make you realize, or did you went inward then, is that correct?
Well, I think, to be honest with you, I think I was able to help them at the time a little bit to avert the crisis, but it wasn't me alone that was helping them. There were other people involved. I think the first realisation was that this is one of those situations in life where there are things that are totally unexpected, completely shocking, and very much outside of my control. There was nothing I could do to get inside that person's head. It was their life and their response to life. It was quite stressing to see how much this person was invaded by negative thoughts. Well, negative's putting it mildly, but just confused, distressed, and in a very, very, as I said, in a very, very critical situation. I've seen this happen a couple of times. I've also been to 2 funerals of people that have committed suicide. One was a very good friend of mine from school, and another one was a grandson of a staff member. And those 2 events, along with the other 2 critical events that I have been involved with, were all of them combined to really, I suppose, shake me up into another, take me into another realisation that there is a lot more going on in life sometimes than we think for people. For some people, it's just way too much.
After these events happened, what did you actually do then? Did you go see somebody and talk about it, or did you read, or what was the process?
All of the above, yeah. I've always been very much into personal development and spiritual development, very strong, I have to say, ever since I was young, very young, probably about 5 or 6, I've been very strong Christian and very interested in that. Yeah, reading about it a lot and obviously talking to people. But the thing is, sometimes when you talk to people about these things, it's too much for them. First of all, they might not have experienced it themselves, so they can't even relate to it. But for other people, it's just way too much. They just block it out. And even I spoke to some people who work in this area, and I think it was too much for them as well. I think some people And also with mental health, one thing I've realised about mental health, particularly people who are in mental health crisis, which can be a long-term thing as well as a short-term thing, it's not like there's an easy black and white solution, and there's many different types of mental health problems. It's a whole gamut, a whole spectrum, from someone who's sort of suicidal right through to someone who's, maybe has mild depression, and then even then there's many different types of depression, which so there's so many different things going on. One thing that's a big problem in this country at the moment is that there's not necessarily immediate help available. For example, not that I'm planning to see one, but there's somebody I know is trying to see a psychiatrist, and that's now May when we're having this conversation, the earliest appointment they could get after many hours of ringing around was September. That's a 4 or 5 month wait, and that's to see somebody, for the first time. I mean, and that's in, this sort of so-called affluent country where you'd think that people would be available, but so many of the psychiatrists are booked out. They've closed their books because there's so many people out there. It's like a sort of silent epidemic that's going on, particularly after COVID. There's so many people out there with mental health problems that they're just overwhelmed. What happens then is that it falls back on the people who are close to those people with the problems to help them. And of course, we're amateurs.
Yeah, of course.
So we can't necessarily help them. We're just fumbling and trying to find our own way to help people that are in a difficult situation.
Yeah, I also think, COVID has highlighted a lot of people's mental health issues because of, maybe losing work, not being able to socialize. So it has become more of a epidemic. The pandemic has made this epidemic of mental health. So your friend that went through this challenging time, was it mainly due to reasons of the pandemic and lockdowns?
I don't really know. Some of it I can't really talk about anyway, but I think that's probably partly the catalyst, but I don't think that's the main problem really. But I think for a lot of people I think the other thing about, say, COVID, even though we sort of say it's over, but it's not really, is that for I think a lot of people that just expose them to how fragile their own lives are, how fickle we are. A little virus can just come along and take you out. Also, just how fragile our society is and how stretched our society is to deal with a wide-ranging problem. And mental health is much more wide-ranging than we'd like to admit.
Yeah.
And I think the other thing about all this is that a lot of people are, have a lot of shame around talking about these things. Even there's a lot of shame about talking about it being in your life with somebody else. So, and, it shouldn't be that way because, we don't have much shame about talking about cancer or some other physical disease, but, mental health is just as much an issue as physical health.
Yeah, and I think with mental health, you can't see it, can you? I mean, physical health, you can physically see that someone's broken a leg or an arm, but you don't know that someone needs help because everyone pretty much looks normal.
Well, I think more to the truth is that everyone pretends to be normal.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Or pretends to be okay.
Yeah.
I mean, who knows what normal is, but they pretend to be okay.
Yeah.
And how often when you say to someone, how are you? And they tell you the truth. And then the people that do tell you the truth think, oh, I won't ask them again.
Yeah, that's right. That was
too long,
too much information. I didn't need that.
I'm busy.
That is so true. So there is shame about mental health, showing that you're going through a hard time. I do think it is getting a little bit better, though. I think people are talking about it a bit more. And one thing with the COVID pandemic lockdown, a lot of people have gone inside and they've been discovering things about themselves and trying to do things better for their health. I have noticed this sort of shift. And you yourself said you went inward after your friend going through this process. So let us know, what did you do right after?
What I've noticed about life after COVID or during COVID is people became a lot more authentic with themselves and with each other. And I think that's one of the good things about crisis, society-wide crises. You see that with, floods or bushfires here in Australia, or just generally when you've got a thing where there's a lot of sort of out of control fears in the society. People need to rely on each other a lot more, so that it draws them to be closer to each other. And I think the other side of, I mean, if you've read any of Brené Brown's stuff about, the real thing about shame is just the willingness to be vulnerable. I think that's a really interesting area. It's just the whole area of, vulnerability, and instead of pretending to have it all together, to be, and there's a lot of strength in being vulnerable, and whereas it's usually looked at the other way, it's weak to be vulnerable. Where I got to is one day I was reading something or listening to something, and I came across a discussion about happiness and how happiness has 4 levels of happiness. And I'm particularly vulnerable to the first level of happiness, which is external beauty. I've been someone that's always, ever since I was a kid, been very taken by beauty of nature, or just general beautiful music, or anything can really, and I suppose I often thought in my life that the ultimate thing in life would be to have a series of unending beautiful moments. But that's a very external focus, and it's very much looking at what's outside of you, or what's coming to you from the outside. And so I think if there's that's one level of happiness, and perhaps the first easiest level to reach at, because sometimes, beauty just hits us in the face. Where we might be just driving along in the car and we see a beautiful sunset, or we see a beautiful scene, and it just hits us, and we're just like, wow, and we're blown away by that. And then we think, oh, this is a perfect moment, or this is a divine moment, and I'm very happy to be in this moment. The thing about that is that it's unplanned for sometimes, and it's also very transitory, doesn't last long. And so that is, if you were just to rely on that, those moments of experiencing external beauty, for example, a holiday, but then you come home and it's all over, and can you come home to your normal mundane life and be happy? And that's sometimes really challenging. So another level of happiness then perhaps is the next level, if there's a progression of them, which is about accomplishing goals. A lot of people get a lot of happiness, including myself, and probably everybody does, in accomplishing certain goals. I mean, I remember even as a teenager, you'd hear there would be a party coming this Saturday night, and all week long you'd think, oh, I can't wait to get to this party on Saturday night. But then I remember how down you'd feel on Sunday or Monday after the party, and then you start to realise, oh, hang on, there's something going on here. Why am I getting so excited about this party, knowing that afterwards I'm going to feel down? So there's some sort of level of transitory happiness there, or something's missing, I suppose. And if you keep thinking that accomplishing these goals will make you happy. I mean, I know from one experience for me was I got, like 4 or 5 years ago, at a stage where for the first time in my life I didn't really have to worry about earning a living, because I'd set up a business that was providing a passive income. And I thought, well, this is something that I've sort of dreamed about all my life. I thought this would be so fantastic. And then it was like, it was quite strange to get used to that. Well, now that's accomplished, what's next? I thought he'd sort of be floating around in cloud 9 all the time, thinking there's nothing to worry about financially. But no, it wasn't. I was still the same person. One aspect of my life was just different. The next level, I think, is serving other people and not just thinking about yourself. I suppose this is really under the category of being selfless rather than selfish. You see, there's lots of ways you could talk about this. In Australia, in particular, in our culture, a lot of people have found happiness in volunteering. You often hear about how people volunteer and they get so much out of that. I think that's just a symbol of what selflessness is all about. And I often find that, if you do volunteer, that what's quite amazing is that the more you give, the more you get back. And even though you're not giving to get back, it's quite amazing how the universe or God, whatever it calls you, gives you back to you in direct, even in far greater proportion than what you give. So there's a great level of happiness there in just serving others and being selfless. And to me, what you're experiencing when you're serving other people is just you're starting to connect with what's common amongst human beings. You just start to realise we've all got so much in common. You're not necessarily, even though we're all unique, we're also all connected in many ways. And I think this was what brings us to that, or the ultimate level of happiness, which is a spiritual connection. This is obviously different for everybody. And come back to that point we're making before about vulnerability. At this level, it's about not in any way at all pretending that you've got it all together, but just to be vulnerable before God, really, or before your spiritual. There's many different expressions of this, but I've travelled a lot around the world in my work, and I've seen this everywhere I've gone in the world. It's really, I remember when I first started to experience it, just, it doesn't matter where you go in the world, you just find people are still, everywhere you go, in every culture, people are seeking this spiritual connection, whether it's in a Buddhist temple in Thailand or, you know, I remember going to, being in India and with one of my kids, and we went to some place and there was these, this is in India, and there was these huge Buddhas that were like, I don't know, 100, 200 feet tall, and they'd been put there by these Chinese people when they've been travelling through India like thousands of years ago. And you think, wow, you know, even thousands and thousands of years ago, people were doing these incredible things to connect with what, you know, what their version of God is. I think it's really, really important, and I think it's something that I struggle with, is just to be vulnerable and open yourself to that connection and to make time for that.
Yeah, not
because
fight
it's very
it.
easy. Yeah, it's very easy to find a million different ways to be busy, or going back to that, you know, accomplishing goals, or even you know, to be busy serving others and doing all these things that you might think, okay, well, I'm doing this because it's a good thing, or I'm doing this because I want to help other people. But have you actually set aside time to be, just sit there and just stand there or whatever? It could be on a walk, it could be sitting at home, it could be anywhere, but lying in bed, but just to actually open yourself and just say, yeah, what do you want to say to me, to your God or whatever, and just listen and just be and just be attentive to that, you know, that, as I say, that still small voice, that what is it that is happening for you. And I find that is probably where I'm at now in my life, that's probably the most rewarding, but also the most difficult thing, because I notice how much I'll avoid and make myself busy and do anything to avoid that ultimate, I think that sort of ultimate vulnerability.
Yeah. I find you can experience it in moments with strangers as well. Like if you're having a conversation, even, you know, looking at them in their eyes, or just really listening to what they're saying, there can be those moments. And I've been very fortunate to experience moments when I'm conducting a ceremony, whether it's a wedding or a funeral. I'll just say, especially at a funeral, I experience this a lot. I'll say some words about the person who's passed, and there'll be a pause, and then a light will flicker in. And it's interesting. It's not just me who's noticed that. And I will point that out, and I'll say, did everybody here just see that light? And then it's that moment that we've all like, wow, that was amazing. So there is something like what you were saying, experience it, being vulnerable, like all of us were vulnerable in that moment.
We started this conversation thinking about how do you help someone with a mental health problem, and then we've been talking about different levels of happiness. If you go back to the beginning and think about mental health, I'm in no way at all an expert. I think if people don't have inner peace, that's really what, in my very humble, inexperienced, I wouldn't say inexperienced, but my humble, non-expert opinion would be that that's sort of what mental health is bad. A mental health problem is probably, in my experience, just not having peace. I can't know if I can sort of tie all this up directly into some sort of amazing point, but I do know, I just want to share an experience I had a few months ago when I was with my wife. We were celebrating our 25th wedding anniversary. You know, to be honest, I think like a lot of people, marriage is not a bed of roses. And it was quite an accomplishment for us to make it to 25 years, putting it mildly. And yeah, a lot of the challenges along the way, if not most of them, are caused by me. I'm being very vulnerable now. But I do say that I do remember that night of the actual 25th wedding, which is 25 years from the day that we got married, and we'd gone up to northern New South Wales, and we were staying in this house not far from the Queensland border. And that night we decided we were going to go out to have dinner, and we decided just stay at the house and and make a meal together. It's a beautiful place that we'd rented, and I just remember as I was walking over to the table, you know, we cooked dinner and we were just sitting there and setting the table, and I was walking over to the table and I just thought to myself, nobody could actually manufacture this moment. Like I couldn't buy this moment. I couldn't fake this moment. I couldn't create this. There's no how-to manual about this moment. There's no recipe for this moment. It just is. It's just a moment in time in which I know that the two of us, through hard work and much discipline and much help from other people as well, and much personal change, got to this moment. And we're also, thank God we're both here. We're both alive. We have, our families to benefit, to thank for this. The fact that we have the values that got us to here. There's so many things that got us to here, which are sort of intangible. But at the end of the day, I just had this incredible feeling or realization that came over me that no one can take this moment away from me. Actually I deserve this moment. We both deserve it. We work for it and we actually deserve it. And it's a unique moment that only the two of us can understand. Yeah, it was quite a powerful moment. I don't even know if I've fully sort of unpacked what that actual moment meant to me, but I do think that there's a sense of something that goes beyond happiness, because it wasn't just a crack the champagne. It was more like, let's just savor this moment and savor the fact that we got here and we didn't give up. And now the feeling that was in me or in us was a deep satisfaction from having not given up. And also, I suppose, a deep gratitude for everything that we had to do to get to there. And maybe that doesn't make sense to people that have just had a really easy marriage. And not that I've ever met anyone who's had one yet, but maybe.
It is hard work, isn't it? It is.
So not to discourage any young people who are wanting to get married here who are listening, but it wasn't just the two of us there. There was the fact that we both had a shared faith. We journeyed together, with God. It wasn't just two of us there. There was sort of, in a sense, three of us there that we were very blessed to have a bigger sort of context to call on and to have a bigger purpose to harness ourselves to get us to there. And been through a lot of challenges along the way. We had 2 miscarriages. We've had financial challenges. Many, many betrayals by people, and just our own having to transform ourselves to become the sort of people that are worthy of being married to. Had all those things were there on, in that moment. Does that make sense?
No, it's I love it. I love it. You've been very vulnerable, and that's what makes people connect. And going through those hard challenges probably connected you even more. Even though they were hard, because you don't really grow if things are easy. You really only grow if there are mistakes. I've been told that my whole life. It's like, who wants to make a mistake? But you always seem to learn more when there are challenges thrown your way. So obviously going through the 25 years of what you've just shared, it would naturally draw people closer or would draw them apart. And it just depends. I mean, sometimes people can't handle the stress of a miscarriage, financial difficulties, but you obviously were in it together. So that's why that moment that you shared with us was so powerful to you, realizing, wow, 25 years and it hasn't been easy. And I think when it's not easy, you appreciate it more. And obviously you've appreciated it more.
And I think that's sort of part of some things that I've read recently is that I think a lot of people, when they're older, have actually a better quality of life because they know the full gamut of life, and they know what's involved in living. And you think, you see young people and, I don't know, I've got this image that comes to my mind of young people that say at the Melbourne Cup, getting drunk and wearing these fantastic clothes and thinking this is it, wow, hoo-ha, they get all excited and I won, $1,000 in a race or whatever. And they think this is the essence of life. But I think there's maybe it is at that moment, but as you get older, there's different things in life that you realise these are more intangible and more precious than anything you probably could have done when you were younger.
I think when you're younger, things matter in a way that really don't matter when you're older.
Mm. Well, I agree with you, but I also think marriage has a purpose, a bigger purpose as well. Part of the purpose of marriage is to demonstrate to the world what true love is.
Yeah,
and
that's right.
And
that's
so,
right.
so you can actually influence other people just by staying married, and especially your children.
Yes.
To them to see that, love. What is love, and that love is, it's like that, famous quote that you've probably read out at many weddings. Love is patient, love is kind, love.
Yeah.
And those things are a lot easier said than done.
Yeah.
Just the first one, patient.
Yeah.
And the big one that I'm really realising at this stage is, which I'm personally, once again, being vulnerable, having to really get real with, is what does it mean to be kind? For my personality, that to be kind out in the world and public and help an old lady across the street, that's all very well and good, but can I be kind in a more challenging arena where someone, say, can I be kind to someone that drives me nuts, but who I've got a commitment to? For me, I'm realising now that maybe being kind, and can I be kind to myself too? That's a big one, because that's the easiest one to be hard on, is myself. To be kind is also, I think, to let go of the need to be right, or let go of the need to win, and just to let go of the need to think that I know it all, or that I know the best way of doing it. And just to be kind can then open up a whole other aspect of the relationship. And like my wife Lisa will often say to me, I just want you to speak kindly. And I think, that's not really that important. It's more, what we're talking about is more important. I want you to get my point. No, it's not about the point. It's about, can we just speak kindly to each other?
Yeah.
And then we can work a lot of stuff out after that. So
Yeah.
So these are all sort of, and also, with, like, say, for example, going back to the, a person supporting a person with mental health challenges, maybe if I can just endure in being kind to them, that alone might crack open another version of reality for them that makes them realise, hang on, life's not that bad.
Yeah. That's true. That's very true.
If I can experience a kindness in my life, then I can understand myself a bit better. I can see myself. I can see, maybe it was maybe they could think maybe it was a kind God that created me, not a cruel God that's trying to give me a hard time.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I don't know, when I'm talking about this, I go back to, those moments when my kids were born, and I just think, those four children, and every birth I was there at their birth, and I just remember that moment when they were born, and you just, that particular moment, and you just think, there's something massive going on here. This, the circle of life, and you just think all these thoughts that come to you, but just that moment when that little baby's there and they're so vulnerable, and you can't be anything but kind to them.
Yeah.
And so, that's, I don't know if I can fully put this together, but it's just, there's something there about just the softness of life that we need to get tuned into more often.
Yeah. I definitely agree with you there. I think we're almost at the end of this. Was there any last thing that you wanted to say, Justin?
I suppose, just to be completely honest, I just want to say that all these things that I've said, I haven't always practiced them myself. I don't want to come across as someone who's like an expert, or come across as someone who's got it all together, or who has always known and lived the things I'm talking about. I think it's very, very important because anybody who's listening to this who knows me would know that I'm far from perfect. So, I think they're just things that you realise, I suppose, over time, and you make a lot of mistakes along the way. Yeah.
Yeah, I think if you just strive to be better the next day or learn from whatever you've experienced the day before. And we're all on this journey together, and it's not the destination, it's the journey, isn't it? So I think that's kind of the biggest takeaway. So thank you so much for being with me today. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thanks, Ellen. And thanks for inviting me.
Thank you so much for your company. Please tune in next week to Life's Rich Tapestry, where you will hear another courageous conversation spoken from the heart.